The moment she clicked the seatbelt shut in his car, she smiled like I didn't exist. I watched from the upstairs window. She never looked back. Not once. No hesitation, no guilt, no uncertainty, just pure excitement. He was waiting in that polished black sedan like a prince collecting someone else's queen. And she floated down the steps like it was a dream. A date. With my boss. 10 minutes earlier, she told me not to wait up. It's professional, she said, tossing on perfume she never wore for me. He just wants to talk business. Business doesn't text heart emojis at midnight. I didn't stop her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding a spoon, stirring soup I made for two. She didn't take even one bite. There was a post-it on the fridge that still said, "I love you," from 3 weeks ago. I took it down and folded it like a letter I'd never sent. I left it under the salt shaker, just to see if she'd notice it missing. She never did. At 2:41 a.m., I heard her heels click across the hardwood floor. She giggled into her phone in the kitchen, whispering, "You're terrible." Then silence. Then a fridge door. Then orange juice. She drank it straight from the carton. The next day, she left for yoga. Her mat was still in the closet. I walked into the garage, opened the trunk of my car, and started loading. Not angrily. Not chaotically. Just methodically, socks, passport, a framed picture of my mom, my old notebooks, the hidden cash under the drawer liner. I even took my winter gloves. She never noticed the small things missing. I left a single text. "You made your choice. I'm making mine." Then I turned the phone off and tossed it in the glove box. I wasn't running away. I was deleting myself. But here's the part that'll really twist your stomach. A week later, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. Subject line, "You need to see this." I hesitated. I clicked. And that's when I realized. This wasn't just betrayal. This was orchestrated. And I wasn't the only one. The email had no greeting. No name. Just a single link and the words, "You missed more than you think." I sat on the edge of a motel bed somewhere in Idaho, still half covered in that cheap motel blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and cigarette ghosts. My thumb hovered over the link for a full minute. I didn't want to know. But of course, I had to. Click. It opened a Dropbox folder labeled with her initials and the name of the company I worked for. Inside? Videos. Screenshots. Voice memos. And I swear, the room temperature dropped 20 degrees. The first video had a timestamp from the night she went out with him. Not in a restaurant. Not in an office. But in his apartment. They were toasting with wine, and she laughed, that laugh, the one she used to save for me. The one that meant she felt safe. She laughed like she'd finally found what she was looking for, and it sure wasn't me. But it wasn't the betrayal that twisted the knife. It was what she said between sips. "He still thinks it was just a business meeting," she said, and then smirked. "He has no idea we planned this weeks ago." Planned. Weeks ago. Suddenly, all those late-night strategy calls, her sudden interest in getting to know my work circle, the dinners she skipped, all of it clicked into place like jagged puzzle pieces. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being replaced. Strategically. Coldly. I don't know who sent me that email. There was no signature. But whoever it was, they had access to things I never would have found on my own. Things like a calendar event labeled "Exit Plan." C&G dated 3 days before she told me about their dinner. A folder of scanned legal forms, divorce documents, property assessments, and even a draft of a message to our mortgage lender requesting sole contact authorization. She wasn't just cheating. She was prepping my erasure. And I had walked right into it, holding her coffee each morning like a fool, asking how her meetings went, checking if she needed gas in the car. I'd been her assistant in my own undoing. I shut the laptop and just sat there, staring at the wall. I don't know how long I stayed frozen. Something inside me just shut down. Not out of rage, but disbelief. I had always thought betrayal came in some cinematic way, a scream, a slammed door, a dramatic confession. But this was paperwork and smirks. This was spreadsheets and secrets. I drove aimlessly for hours after that. I passed 3 exits I didn't even register. I just kept going until the sun dipped behind the mountains and I was surrounded by nothing but silence and sky. Somewhere near a gas station in a town too small to have streetlights, I finally stopped. I sat in the driver's seat for an hour before going in. The old man behind the counter barely looked at me. I bought a pack of gum and asked if there was a place nearby with Wi-Fi. He pointed to a diner down the road. I thanked him and left, but not before noticing the headlines on the local paper by the door. "Man vanishes days after wife's business dinner." My hands went cold. I picked it up. The article was short, barely 200 words, but there it was. My name. A missing person report filed by her. She told them I had emotional issues and had likely wandered off without medication. She included a photo from our honeymoon. A photo where I looked happy, where I looked blind. She wasn't trying to find me. She was trying to control the story. And that's when I realized something I hadn't let myself admit until now. I couldn't just disappear. Not anymore. I had to let her know I was still watching. I had to make her nervous. So I crafted a new email. From a burner account. Subject line, just dinner. And all I wrote was, "You blinked, Camille. That's where you slipped." I didn't sign it. I didn't send a follow-up. Then I waited. And the way she reacted, well, you'll want to hear what happened next. She opened the email 7 minutes after it was sent. I watched the read receipt pop up while sitting in a back booth at that same diner the gas station guy pointed me toward. It had cracked leather seats and a buzzing fluorescent light above the counter that flickered every 6 seconds. A waitress named Patty brought me lukewarm coffee I never touched. I was too focused on the screen, waiting for something, anything, to show that my silence had become noise. 7 minutes. That's all it took. And then, silence. No reply. No call. But at 3:11 a.m., a new notification lit up the screen. A different email. This time, from an unfamiliar sender again, though the formatting was the same. No greeting. No sign-off. Just a single file attached. File name, Camille_audio_gen22.m4. I hesitated. My hands felt clammy. The screen looked blurry, and I wasn't sure if it was my eyes or the light above me finally dying. I pressed play. Her voice came through immediately. Not soft. Not intimate. But cold. Focused. Calculated. Once he's gone, we just wait. Give it a few weeks. I'll say he's unstable. That he left for some clarity. The therapist angle always works. And if he comes back, well, then we'll already have leverage with the narrative. I've got enough text saved to make him look obsessive. He'll fold. Then Gordon's voice chimed in. And if he doesn't? She paused. Then laughed. Then we'll just remind him who signs his checks. I hit pause. It felt like someone had just poured boiling water over my spine. My ears rang. I'd heard betrayal before. I'd lived it. But this wasn't about emotions or mistakes or drifting apart. This was strategy. Structure. A campaign. They hadn't just betrayed me. They planned to destroy me socially, financially, emotionally. Strip away everything I was and paint me as a confused, broken man who wandered off into the night because he couldn't handle real life. And honestly, maybe that version of me would have vanished. Would have folded quietly, taken the shame, the gaslighting, the public smearing. But that guy didn't exist anymore. I spent the next 2 days doing something I never imagined I'd do. Tracking everything. Backups of phone bills. Cloud folders. Deleted messages recovered through recovery software. All those moments I dismissed as nothing, they were something. Messages between her and Gordon using code names. A mysterious wire transfer she made to a private account weeks before I left. And even notes from a lawyer I didn't recognize, outlining steps for post-separation asset retention. She hadn't just wanted to cheat. She wanted to win. But she hadn't counted on me having nothing left to lose. That night, I found a public computer and submitted a report to HR at my company. Anonymously. I attached the audio file. I didn't need to sign my name. Gordon's voice was all over it. There was no mistaking it. I knew how that department worked. HR wouldn't confront him outright. They'd investigate quietly. Interview staff. Pull phone records. If even half of what I sent raised alarms, he'd be done. But that wasn't enough. I needed her to feel it. So I went further. I mailed a flash drive to her mother's house. A copy of the video, the emails, and a single sentence typed on paper. Ask her what she gave up to keep her image clean. No return address. Just truth. The next day, I checked a private account I hadn't touched in years, the one my dad helped me open before he passed. I had just enough in it for a plan I never thought I'd use. One I kept in the back of my mind like a dusty fire extinguisher. And just like that, the next phase began. A new name. A new address. And a burner number she'd never recognize. But what happened next wasn't something I planned for. Because as soon as Gordon was suspended, Camille found me. And the look in her eyes when she did? It wasn't guilt. It was fear. It started with a knock. Not loud. Not frantic. Just deliberate. 3 soft taps. Like whoever was on the other side wasn't in a rush. Like they knew I was inside and wanted me to feel it. I'd been renting a room above an old mechanic's garage in a nowhere town called Hollow Pines. Population barely scratching 500. No cell service. Just static on the radio and a vending machine that spat out lukewarm sodas. The landlord was a Vietnam vet who didn't ask questions as long as rent was in cash. It was perfect. Quiet. Invisible. Or so I thought. I hadn't spoken out loud to anyone in days. So when I stood up from the couch, heart hammering, I wasn't sure if I should answer or climb out the back window. Another knock. Then a pause. And finally, a voice. "Howie, I know you're in there." Her voice. I didn't open the door. My legs locked, every cell in my body screaming to vanish again. But something made me step forward. Maybe it was the fact that she used that nickname like a weapon, always sharp with a smile. Or maybe it was because I knew the mask was slipping. I cracked the door just wide enough to see her face. She looked different. Not in a disheveled, heartbroken way. No tears. No messy hair. Not even a trace of the remorse I'd imagined for weeks. She looked polished. Controlled. But her eyes weren't steady. They darted, calculating, scanning everything behind me. A predator assessing a cage. "I'm not here to fight," she said softly. "You shouldn't be here at all," I answered, my voice hoarse from disuse. She tilted her head, almost like she was trying to appear innocent. "I just want to talk. Can I come in?" "No." A pause. Then, her eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, huh? Sending that audio to HR?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. The answer was in my silence. Her jaw tightened, and for a second, the mask slipped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I leaned against the doorframe. "Remind me. Was it more or less than what you tried to do to me?" She glanced over her shoulder as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Then she stepped closer, lowered her voice. "You don't understand, Howie. This wasn't about you." That sentence hit harder than I expected. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even an apology. It was a confirmation that I was never part of her plan. I was collateral, a background prop in her carefully curated image. "I don't want to escalate this," she said, voice suddenly sweet, diplomatic. "We can fix things. Smooth it over. You come back quietly. Let this thing with Gordon settle down. We'll say you had a breakdown. We'll make it clean." "You mean, I let you finish writing the story," I said. "The one where I disappear and you move on unscathed?" She didn't deny that either. I almost laughed. But instead, I reached down beside the door and held up an envelope. Thick. Sealed. Her name written on the front in block letters. She tensed. "What is that?" "Proof," I said, "of what you tried to do. And what you're still doing." Her expression faltered for the first time. "I already sent copies to 3 people," I added. "Different states. Different names. Just in case anything happens." I could see her calculating again. Her mind running through possible outcomes, probabilities, risks. "You've made your point," she said at last, her voice a little colder now. "But just know this, when people see you, hear how you sound, they'll believe whatever I tell them." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Maybe, but they won't only hear from you anymore." She left without another word. I watched her get into a rental car, slam the door harder than she needed to, and drive off with a squeal of tires on gravel. I waited until the taillights disappeared over the ridge before locking the door. And I stood there, alone in the dark, realizing something I hadn't allowed myself to accept until now. This wasn't just about exposing her anymore. It was about reclaiming me. And I was only getting started. After she drove off, I didn't sleep. I sat in that dim, stuffy room for hours, the old ceiling fan creaking overhead like it was struggling to keep time. Every few minutes, I replayed her words in my head. "This wasn't about you." It rang over and over, each repetition cutting deeper. It was strange how something so cold could actually make things clearer. She hadn't come to make peace. She came to reclaim control, and that meant I was finally getting under her skin. The next morning, I packed up what little I had and checked out of the garage apartment. The old vet landlord didn't ask why, just gave me a nod, as if he already knew I wasn't the kind of man who stayed long in one place anymore. I left the keys in the mailbox and got back on the road. But this time, I wasn't driving aimlessly. I had a plan now, or at least the rough shape of one. First stop, the town where Camille had grown up. A place she never talked about unless it was absolutely necessary. She always kept her past in a tight box, wrapped in silk and tied with silence. But I remembered once, during our second year of marriage, she mentioned a name, Heather. Her childhood friend. back when Camille still told me things. I found Heather on Facebook. She hadn't posted in 3 years, but her last photo was geotagged. A small cafe tucked into a street corner I could find on GPS. I figured it was a long shot. But the funny thing about people from your past is they rarely forget your name if you left the kind of impression Camille did. The cafe was quiet, sleepy even. A couple of students tapping on laptops, the hiss of a milk frother, an old man reading the newspaper like the world would wait for him to finish. I walked in, ordered a coffee I wouldn't drink, and asked the barista if Heather still worked there. She did. And when she came out from the back and saw me, she froze like she'd seen a ghost. "You're Camille's husband," she said slowly, her eyes narrowing. I corrected. We sat at a table in the corner, her arms crossed, face unreadable. But what she told me, what she warned me about, rattled something loose in me. Heather didn't seem surprised by the fact that Camille had done something awful. In fact, she said something that made my stomach knot. She always knew how to weaponize charm, she said. Even when we were kids, Camille could smile and make people doubt their own eyes. She once convinced our teacher that I was the one who stole from the class fund. I was suspended. 2 years later, she admitted it during a drunken New Year's Eve party like it was a funny memory. Like it was cute. It got darker. Camille had a pattern. Making people feel safe. Building loyalty. Then flipping it for leverage. Teachers. Old bosses. An ex-fiancé who, according to Heather, left the state after Camille accused him of harassment when he tried to break up. No charges were filed. But the damage stuck. And then Heather said something that almost made me fall out of my chair. "You know she tried this before, right? The vanishing act? She dated this guy in college. Took a bunch of money from a joint account, disappeared for a month, came back, and convinced everyone he was unstable and had left her in debt. He tried to fight back, but nobody listened. They never do. Not when Camille turns on the waterworks." I felt sick. That email I got. The audio. The missing puzzle pieces. This wasn't just about me. It was a pattern. A rehearsed performance. She wasn't just cruel, she was practiced. I asked Heather if she had any proof. Messages. Stories. Anything. She hesitated at first. Said she didn't want to get involved. But then she looked at me and saw something, I don't know what, and her expression softened. "I kept something," she said. "After the whole fiancé incident. I didn't know if I should ever share it. But maybe now's the time." She sent it to me an hour later. A voice memo, distorted with age but unmistakable in tone. "Camille, laughing. Drunk. I don't break hearts. I dismantle them. And when I'm done, they don't even remember who they were before me." That was enough. I took the file and sent it anonymously to a journalist I'd met once during a work event. Someone who specialized in corporate scandals and power dynamics. I didn't include Camille's name yet. I just wrote, "If you're looking for a story, there's a woman who's built a life out of making men disappear." No reply, but I knew it landed. Back in my motel room, I opened a new burner email and wrote Camille just 4 words. "Still think I folded?" This time, her reply came fast. But it wasn't just a message. It was a threat. Her reply wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was surgical. Just 12 words. "If you think you're immune to consequences, think again. Watch carefully." It was vague enough to seem harmless. But I knew Camille. Vagueness was her signature. She never swung a sword when she could cut you open with a whisper. And the scariest part was, I couldn't tell if she was bluffing or already 3 steps ahead. Still, I didn't flinch. Not this time. I was in a different state by then, staying in a roadside cabin owned by a retired park ranger who took cash and never asked why you didn't want a receipt. The kind of place where cell service was a suggestion and the only sound at night was the wind grinding through tree branches like a saw blade. Safe. Remote. Unfindable, or so I thought. 2 nights later, around midnight, I saw movement outside the cabin. A figure, just barely visible, standing beneath the tree line. Not moving. Not walking closer. Just watching. I didn't go outside. I didn't turn on the lights. I just watched back. They left after maybe 10 minutes, but the message was clear. She'd found me. Again. I packed and left before dawn, but the thought gnawed at me. How? I hadn't used my real name. Hadn't touched a card or a traceable device in weeks. Then I remembered, when I first emailed the journalist, I used a burner laptop I'd picked up at a pawn shop, but I'd connected it to the cabin's Wi-Fi. And that, apparently, was enough. Camille was hunting me digitally. She wasn't trying to win anymore. She was trying to erase me completely. I drove for 9 hours straight without stopping. Somewhere between state lines, I started to feel like a ghost of myself. My hair was longer than it had ever been, my beard patchy and uneven. My eyes had this sunken look, like I hadn't seen my reflection in weeks. And in truth, I hadn't. Not really. I avoided mirrors. They reminded me of the man who let her get that far in the first place. But this wasn't about shame anymore. This was about finishing what I started. I checked into a cheap roadside inn under a name I pulled from a gravestone in a forgotten cemetery. I only stayed long enough to charge the burner laptop and reconnect with the journalist I'd messaged. This time, I gave her everything. The emails, the audio, the voice memo Heather gave me, even copies of the drafted legal documents I'd found in Camille's cloud drive. And I attached one final note. I'm not the only one. Start digging. This time, she replied within hours. Her name was Marcy. She thanked me, said she'd already been poking around the HR complaints at my old company and had uncovered 2 anonymous claims against Gordon that were buried years ago. Neither made it to formal investigation. Both vanished after Camille joined the company. She told me she was going to run the story. My chest tightened. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was something. I had barely let myself feel it when the next hit came. An email sent to my old friends, my coworkers, even distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. It came from a burner account linked to me, or at least a version of me that Camille had fabricated. The message read, I'm struggling with severe mental health issues. I've abandoned everything and everyone. Please forgive me. If you receive any strange messages from someone pretending to be me, it isn't. Just let me go. She didn't just try to bury me. She created my digital suicide. It was so smooth, so believable, that I got 3 messages that day from former colleagues wishing me peace and hoping I'd find clarity. My cousin Shelley even sent me a screenshot of a Reddit post she thought was beautiful. It was the exact message from the email, posted in a grief forum under my name. Camille had stolen my voice. And now I realized the real battle wasn't about exposing her. It was about reclaiming my own identity. I didn't want to run anymore. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be silenced. And the way I was going to do that? Let's just say Gordon wasn't the only one who kept records. And Camille left something behind she didn't know I found. Camille had always been careful. That was her whole identity. Measured words, curated expressions, and nothing left behind she didn't want someone to find. She lived like she was already being watched. And maybe that's what made what I found so poetic. Because in the end, it wasn't a hidden message or secret recording that changed everything. It was something small. Something so incredibly stupid. A shared cloud drive we had set up during the early years of our marriage. Back when we still took weekend trips and posted couple selfies with embarrassing hashtags. She had forgotten it existed, and honestly, so had I. But when I was digging for anything, any strand of rope to hold on to, I remembered the password we used to use for everything. It worked. And buried inside a folder labeled Tax Docs was a video. Not hidden, not encrypted. Just there. It was dated 4 months before our collapse. 4 months before just dinner. The preview thumbnail showed Camille in a hotel room mirror, laughing as she adjusted her hair. She looked over her shoulder and said, "Are you recording?" Then Gordon's voice, "For insurance, babe. Just in case." The camera tilted as he climbed onto the bed behind her. I didn't watch more than 10 seconds. I didn't have to. The date stamp was what mattered. For months before she told me she wasn't sure about us anymore. For months before she started pulling away. It wasn't just an affair. It was a campaign. And the worst part? They filmed it like it was a trophy. A keepsake. Like betraying me was part of the celebration. I copied the file to a secure drive. I didn't upload it anywhere, didn't blast it online, didn't do what every petty part of me wanted to. No. That wasn't the point. I had what I needed, but I still didn't have what I wanted, her silence, her retreat. I didn't want her fired. I didn't want her exposed. I wanted her irrelevant. So I called Marcy, the journalist. I told her about the video, not what was in it, just enough to confirm the timeline, the deception, the power imbalance between Camille and Gordon, the pattern of manipulation that could no longer be brushed off, as he said, she said. She was stunned silent for several seconds, then asked, "Are you ready for this to go public?" "No," I said. "But she is." The article dropped 2 days later. It didn't name Camille directly. Marcy had done her due diligence, but it laid out a story so precise, so damning. that everyone who knew the players filled in the blanks within an hour. A powerful corporate executive accused of colluding with a romantic partner to discredit, isolate, and sabotage a subordinate. It was elegant, brutal, and completely true. Gordon was finished. My old company released a quiet internal memo that same afternoon confirming his suspension pending further review. I didn't need them to say more. I already knew he wouldn't be coming back. But Camille? She panicked. I got 3 calls from unknown numbers that day. I didn't answer. Then came the emails. First apologetic, then confused, then furious. She begged me to stop, said she was losing everything, said I misunderstood the situation. Then, without missing a beat, threatened to sue for defamation. Said she'd find every way to prove I was unstable, that she'd bury me. I responded with one sentence. You forgot who knew the whole story. I didn't need to say more, because what she didn't know was that I wasn't the only one she left bruised. Heather had spoken to Marcy. So had a second man, one of Camille's college boyfriends who'd been ghosted and accused of stalking after catching her in bed with someone else. The article had sparked a chain reaction, and now, Camille's past wasn't just catching up to her. It was stampeding. Her silence was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The next day, I bought a one-way train ticket under a new name. No more hiding. No more running. But no return either. I wasn't going back to my old life because it no longer existed. That man, the one who apologized too much, smiled through discomfort, and convinced himself that being forgotten was normal. He was gone. I stood on that platform as the sun rose, thinking about how it all started. With a dinner. A lie. A dress she'd never worn for me. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted her to look around one day and realize that the silence left in my absence was the loudest consequence of all. But fate wasn't quite finished. Because as I boarded the train, a stranger sat across from me. She smiled politely, tilted her head, and said Camille's full name. I froze. The stranger across from me didn't look threatening. She looked curious, maybe a little nervous. Mid-30s, glasses, soft voice, calm energy. She sat with her hands folded on her lap and a small leather notebook resting on the seat beside her. When she said Camille's name, it wasn't cold or accusatory. It was almost hesitant, as if she was testing to see if I'd flinch. I didn't answer immediately. Sorry, I said, keeping my tone even. Why did you say that name? She smiled gently. I saw you in the article. Not by name, but you matched the description. I was part of that company once too. Gordon was my manager for almost a year. That's when I noticed it, a tiny tremor in her fingers. Not fear. Familiarity. She had been through it too. Not with Camille, but with him. We spoke for hours. Her name was Callie. She had worked in the same division years ago and left after reporting Gordon for inappropriate behavior. Nothing ever came of it. Her file vanished. She'd been silenced. Forgotten. But after the article dropped, she'd felt something shift. She said it was the first time she felt seen. And now, she was writing a piece of her own. Not for revenge, not for drama, but for closure. And you? She asked softly, as the train hummed beneath our feet. Are you free now? I thought about that. For a long time, I didn't feel free. I felt erased, like someone had wiped my identity with careful, deliberate strokes. Camille had tried to redefine me, to those around me, and even to myself. But what I realized, sitting across from a woman who had survived her own battle, was that the story Camille tried to write wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of mine. I think I am, I finally answered. We're getting there. When we got off the train, we exchanged numbers, not in a romantic way, not yet, but as two people who understood the weight of being erased and the relief of becoming visible again. It felt honest. Weeks passed. The fallout from the article grew louder, but I stayed quiet. Not hidden, just still. I settled in a coastal town where no one knew my name. Got a small job helping restore old furniture. Simple work. Real work. I started sleeping again. I started laughing again. Some days, I even forgot to check my burner email. And that, more than anything, felt like a victory. One morning, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the looping script. Camille. I almost threw it away. But I opened it, slowly, ready for anything. Inside were just 2 words. You won. No apology. No begging. Just those 2 words. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. There was nothing left to win. No final point to prove. I folded the letter once and dropped it into the sea. Months later, I met Callie again. We went for coffee. then walks, then full conversations that didn't circle around trauma. We talked about art, music, bad movies, our shared quiet. And one day, sitting beside her on a weathered bench with the wind in our faces and nothing hanging over our heads, I smiled for no reason. She looked at me. What? I think, I said, I've finally stopped disappearing. It didn't happen in a dramatic burst. It happened like a tide returning, quiet, steady, and undeniable. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need Camille's downfall. I only needed one thing: to remember who I was without her shadow. And I did. I'm still here. And for the first time in a long, long time. I like it.